Donkey Skin. I'm surprised I hadn't heard about this movie before yesterday. It has a great cast: Catherine Deneuve, Jean Marais, Jacques Perrin, a few more people, but I've just used up my French pronunciation budget for the day. It was directed by, can't tell you who it was directed by, but he has two movies that are still relatively popular musicals. It has a unique visual style, a big vibe, and it's not totally obscure, especially if you live in France. But for those of us in the developed world, you probably have not seen it, which is actually fine because it's not that good. Or is it great? I haven't totally made up my mind about this one, to be honest. This is a fairy tale. We'll talk about fairy tales in film in a moment. You might think of Beauty and the Beast when you see it, but there's actually a fairy tale called Donkey Skin. You know, Donkey Skin by old Charles Perrault. Oh, was that a French name? Whoops. We don't have this one in the United States. Possibly in Kentucky, they do. That's not a joke. Is this movie for kids? I'm not totally sure about that. In fact, it's a little unclear to me who the movie is for and why it was made, but maybe that's okay. The film is from 1970. The fairy tale is from 1695. So it's maybe a little hard to grasp the context of both of them. Possibly that's one of the charms of the movie. I could tell you the plot in a minute, but I'll just say that it's about the trials of a beautiful princess who has to escape a castle and work as a scullery maid while wearing a donkey skin. But don't worry, Prince Charming is a foot. Anyway, the first thing that is going to jump out at you about this movie, without a doubt, is the style. This is almost an animated film, but they made it live action, sort of. Lots of embellishment, big colors, huge dresses with big colors. The courtesans at the castle are all blue, not just blue clothing, but the faces are painted as well. Think of the Blue Man Group. And don't even get me started on the Red King and the Red Castle and all the courtesans there. There are some nice special effects in the film. At one point, the princess asks for a dress the color of the sky. Some nice fairy tale poetics there. And believe it or not, she gets a dress that looks just like the sky. Kind of. Some decent special effects, along with some jump cuts that would make Barbara Eden blush. There are some cool uses of slow motion in the film. They use it almost indiscriminately in a way that I haven't really seen in any other movies. This doesn't exactly make sense, but I liked it. This is a musical. The music is really good, actually. Classical kind of sound. There are only a handful of songs, so if you don't like it, not too big of a deal. And the lip syncing is terrible, but who cares, really? You may already be picking up on a couple themes in the movie. This princess is renowned for her beauty. The way that people talk about beauty in fairy tales is a bit different from how people talk about beauty in other movies, usually. A lot of movies are actually, they're kind of actively working against the idea of the most beautiful in all the land. And maybe this one is too, because the princess spent some time wearing a donkey skin, being overlooked, being a scullery maid, still don't know what that is. But she is still inherently beautiful, isn't she? And it's inevitable that this will be revealed. So the moral thrust of this movie, at least in this aspect, is a little up in the air. And actually, there's something similar going on with class. The princess has a very soft life. The castle is introduced. We first meet the king, a very virtuous king. He's virtuous because he has a very beautiful wife, but he has an even more beautiful daughter, right? What do you make of this exactly? I don't know. Probably this class angle will jump out at you from the beginning. Given that this is a fairy tale, I guess I was primed to feel out some kind of didactic logic in the movie. And I started on the first page when we meet the princess. When we meet the princess and she has it all, and later asks for even more, you think, okay, well, maybe this will be a story where the princess learns not to do that, learns what really matters in life, or where she meets some commoner that offsets her lifestyle and shows her what really matters in life. Well, none of those things happen. The princess does spend some time as a scullery maid. She lives in a hovel in the woods. Did I mention she's a scullery maid? The cabin is actually pretty nice. It's enormous by New York City standards. But when she gets there, she takes kind of a deep breath and then pulls out a magic wand and summons a nice bed and chair for herself. Think from Crate and Barrel. If you were thinking that she was going to learn something from the simple life, maybe not. And again, this theme, the moral thrust here is not quite as legible as you might expect. Maybe I had the wrong expectations, and maybe it's the point that you're not going to quite have the moral message or something. Disney, I guess, primarily has reshaped what a lot of people think of as fairy tales, but if you read old fairy tales, they are often pretty old and weird. Like I said, this might be part of the charm of the movie. I think it is, but at the same time, it does sort of feel undynamic. Like, what was the point of this? You're setting up some sort of fairy tale tropes, but they don't quite get paid off? I'm not sure. And hey, it might feel a little dated. No surprise, the story is from 1695. There's a scene where the princess, wearing her donkey skin, is asked to bake a cake for Prince Charming. So she takes out her magic cookbook and bakes the most delicious cake in all the land. Domestic life. I should point out that this movie being from the 70s, being maybe a little bit campy or something, you might expect it to be reversing some of this stuff. You might expect it to be a revisionist fairy tale in some ways because it does some odd things. You might expect it to be satirizing what princesses were expected to do, to be coyly suggesting something about a woman's work and a woman's world. Does it do that? You can read it like that if you really want to. I was expecting that. I was looking for that, but I didn't really see it. Like I said at the beginning, the context of the movie can be a little hard to find. I kind of wish that I had seen other Jacques Demy movies. I haven't. Maybe that would give me a foothold into his view of femininity, which is probably one of the film's biggest themes, but is a bit of a cipher. Now, there are a few hints of the 1970s in the movie, and these sort of feel like anchor points, but they're also kind of surprising. What's the opposite of an anchor point? For instance, there's a moment when the princess and the prince talk about how as lovers, they're going to do lots of forbidden things with each other. Normally, fairy tale love is something very pure and wholesome, but this is much more decadent, almost naughty. Little surprising. This sounds more like 1970 than 1695, but who am I to say? I think this is where they also, briefly together, appear to smoke from some sort of hookah or something. Again, a little surprising. Another element are the mischievous fairies. Other characters often bemoan the antics of the fairies, and the fairy godmother almost seems like a blueprint for a more modern woman, but I guess she's kind of limited by the story itself, and ultimately this doesn't really go anywhere, and the end of her storyline is a little bit puzzling. I didn't know exactly what to make of it. Not super legible, again. Another interesting thing in the movie are some anachronistic moments. The fairy godmother accidentally mentions future technology a few times, but hey, she's magic, so no big deal. Now, at one point, there is a very noticeable anachronism. It clearly intentional. I really want to tell you what it is because it's extremely amusing and just interesting. But it's more fun to experience it yourself, so I will not spoil what happens. Clearly, the movie is playing with the form a little bit, clearly. Speaking of the form, let's say a few things about fairy tales. This movie starts with a book. That's the law. If you're making a fairy tale kind of thing, for some reason, it must begin with a book. Maybe it's Peter Falk reading you a book, but probably it's a big book that opens up to show us the movie. Are they still going to do this once kids don't know what books are? Once bedtime stories, which is, I guess, what all these book things are alluding to, once bedtime stories are read off of a Kindle or generated in real time by ChatGPT? Who knows? But anyway, we also have some narration, another staple of the genre. In some ways, the film is paying its dues to the genre. It's paying the admittance fee so that it can go on to do a bunch of weird stuff and sort of subvert the genre. But for me, I don't know. It maybe ends up just being a little bit caught in the middle. It has unique ideas, yes, but I didn't find it to be hugely subversive or extreme, not enough to be an unhinged fairy tale. I'm not saying that it should be, but like I said, I kind of was expecting it to do sort of a revisionist thing, to be some bit of a reversal, and it doesn't get all the way there. If you insist that the whole thing is satire, maybe I could be convinced. I don't know. It's a little too odd to be a normal fairy tale, although some of the oddness comes from the material itself. Like, there is a subplot where the king wants to marry his daughter. This is not Disney material. It's the true weirdness of an old fairy tale. I guess I struggle to understand what cultural work the movie is doing here. I'm not saying it has to have a big moral or something, although that usually is the kind of thing you expect from a fairy tale, but the movie does kind of set itself up as an arbiter of old cultural artifacts and ideas via the fairy tale, via this form, which it is clearly inhabiting, and also via a lot of the plot points around beauty, around marriage, around, just the life of a woman, really. It's also alluding to some new things, sort of. It has hints of 1970 peeking through a little bit, but where does this all land? Where do we go with this? I wasn't really sure. Maybe I'm being a little bit too harsh here. Truth is, I just didn't quite click with the movie in the end, but I think I liked it nonetheless. Maybe the issue here is also that there isn't actually that much story in the movie. The plot is fairly predictable. Even if there are a few odd things that happen, you still know how it's going to begin, middle, and end. there are a lot of elements that don't really go anywhere. There's a lot of plot lines, a lot of things that are built up and seem like they're going to cause major conflict, but they don't. So, didn't quite do it for me in some ways. Or there's something left on the table, I feel, in this movie, which has some building blocks to be a really cool and really interesting movie, and it certainly has parts that are very cool and very interesting, but it doesn't quite go all the way. Still, I suspect that a lot of people are still going to vibe with Donkey Skin, and I would recommend it to the desperate cinephiles out there looking for any scrap of novelty.